some partisan stuff that I definitely think is worth acknowledging. Just one is first, actually, before we get into like the deflection points. Oh, actually, I take that back. There's a couple of points I'll include here, but I want to highlight the technocratic stuff, and then we're going to get into sort of the deflection points here. But first is this. Just again, like I said, there's some of these things I just want to include so you guys can see the updates we've touched on. I just think this is kind of wild that we're talking about this lie. Speaking of the lies, for example, and the ability for them to just wholesale lie to you, even though we can easily prove it. The same reference I feel like that was one of the earliest examples from this admin. And again, interestingly, starting with Stephen Miller, where he just decided to go, we won that case 7-0. A major and highly documented Supreme Court case where they very clearly lost 0-7. Now, you may not agree with that. You may not remember. The point is, as absolute fact, that was the case. You could print out the document. You can watch the judge talk. People are going, what are they talking about? Here's the actual ruling. Okay. The point is he lied about that, and he knew he lied about that. It was an exercise to see if they, and sure enough, all of the ones you might expect. Nick's order and all of that came out and they said, we won. Literally, I remember Nick's doing that. Holy crap, red flag. Oh my God, we won 7-0. And I doubt Nick even cared whether it was true, didn't know, but they lied. They knowingly misled people, and then that just carried to the conversation. And to this very day, I could bring that up, or at least when it was still sort of in the conversation, weeks later, and people would still argue. No, we won that. It's just, it speaks to where we actually are right now. Now, in this case, same kind of thing. Right. And this is actually it's interesting how they're pushing this right now. I honestly think it's more about drawing attention to the fact that they're lying, to go ignore everything else, maybe. But end of the day, let's not forget Donald Trump, and I might even have that article. He stated this out loud. This is why I think it's so interesting that he does this. Let's see if it pops up. How does that keep happening? Let's see. Well, here's just the same discussion. The point was that Donald Trump said very, very publicly, had to do the SAVE Act, that unless they pass this, or until they do, he will not sign any bills. And that's not popping up. So, and it's easy to check for yourself. That's the reality. And so he said that we're not going to sign anything until you pass this. And as by the way, it even says right here, you'll find out, then when it came around to where they were holding things up and vote, and like for the TSA example, they just made this big case about Democrats don't fund the. I showed you the voting roll for that vote about funding TSA, and it was voted no by I think by every Republican. And they turn around and say the Democrats won't pay them. Now, I'm not even joking. If you haven't looked into this, what they're doing is the same thing they do every time. It's not unique to Republicans. Democrats do it when it's their turn. They simply, they put their foot down and say, this is what we demand. And you have to do that, or we're not going to do this. And then they choose not to, which is their prerogative. And then because they're the one, Trump's administration, holding it up, waiting for them to do what they want, they claim it's their fault. It's like, you're stop hitting yourself with your brother kind of a thing. It's like you're the one doing it to yourself. They're the ones doing it to the other side, blaming them for not letting it happen. Now, this is Fox News asking, why isn't Trump involved in trying to get the end the government shutdown? Here's how Johnson replies.
Speaker, it seems as though Republicans and Democrats are talking past one another right now. Mm-hmm. Is the only person who could solve this the President of the United States, and why isn't he involved?
Well, I think he is involved. I mean, I know he had a group of...
down the plan yesterday.
Well, that's what's been reported, okay.
He said he voted down the plan. He did. That's what's been reported? That's what he says.
He brought some...
He said that in the Oval Office that he was not pleased.
He said it in the Oval Office because he did. So you have to understand, like, this is how crazy this is. Johnson is well aware that we're not stupid. We can look at it. They know. But the point is just a lie. So then screaming idiots online will carry the lie for you and mix up the conversation, or maybe convince somebody that's the case.
With that plan.
Well, I actually have his exact quote somewhere. I think he said that, to paraphrase him, I think he said he's a little skeptical or cynical that a deal's going to come together. What we're hearing, okay, in our chamber is that there's discussions going on that Democrats are demanding to break off parts of Homeland and fund it separately.
I found these articles to show you here. It's important just so we can have it on the record for those that, tend to not want to hear it, and so they'll ignore it until you can show them. But so this is what's important, right? Because it's funny to watch him sit there and deny that, right? And here, Donald Trump refuses to sign other bills until SAVE Act is passed. Now, to be clear, that's not just them mischaracterizing his statements. That's what he said. And this was back on March 8th, right? So that's why they just think we can't remember after 2-3 weeks. And here's another one. Trump warns Republicans, no compromise on the DHS deal until country-destroying Dems push through SAVE Act. So you have to understand, it's very clear. He's just saying, you do this or we're not going to let anything else happen. And then when they don't do what they're told, he turns around and goes, they're not letting all these things happen. It's just ridiculously juvenile. And to be clear, again, like I said, it's not just him, but it's what he is doing right now. Now, so if you're one of the people trying to pretend that this is different, he's not like them, or he's not like the guy, he's the rebel fighting the deep state, then ask yourself why he's acting the exact same way. So inside a paper, President Trump, I am going to sign an order instructing the Secretary of Homeland Security, Mark Wayne Mullen, to immediately pay our TSA agents in order to address this emergency situation and to quickly stop the Democrat chaos at the airport. Democrat chaos, right? Because they're the ones, they just have look, I don't think highly of any of these people. I don't think they have principles, but the reality of what they're claiming is that they don't agree with it. And they clearly don't. So what you want is for them to do something they don't agree with. And if they don't do what they don't agree with, you're going to make sure everything else doesn't happen. In what world is that anybody's fault but Trump's? It just is such a silly thing we deal with. And these people are all such childish people. The Democrat chaos at the airports. It's not an easy thing to do, but I'm going to do it. Oh, because you're such a great person, Trump. How great of you to praise yourself and how great you are. I think about how weird that is. And he says bipolar disorder right here, he says. Doom. But so, basically, this is so funny. Radical left Democrats and their leader, crying Chuck Schumer, have made... I don't know. I'm just so tired of pretending like this person is worthy of respect, or any of them for that matter. But the idea that why do you have to speak like this? Like, it's not respectable or cool or somehow, bucking the system to just be an idiot, to just be ridiculously juvenile and crying Chuck Schumer, radical left Democrats. You're being hyperbolic. You're being inaccurate. You're being over, it's just not respectable. People should make fun of anybody doing that. Now, if you think that, that's fine. But clearly, he'll say things tomorrow that mean the opposite. It's just this person is just screaming what I think he thinks you want to hear. Justin Amass says Trump demands unconstitutional warrantless surveillance of all Americans. This is a different post. Speaker of the House Johnson and Senate Majority Leader John Thune have been working to pass a clean extension of FISA. Oh, he said clean, Ryan, so you don't understand it's going to be a good MAGA version of the thing we've all been fighting and hating this entire time. Sure, you're actually hearing that from some people. The point is, he wants one standard for himself, no spying, and another for everybody else. Spy like crazy. It's just like the fact that we'll get to in a second, where he just literally admitted that he did mail-in voting because he's president. He can. So shut up. Yes, it literally just happened. The so-called reforms made to 702 in the past are a joke. That's why he wants a clean expansion. They're just doing what they claimed was. I mean, I could bring it up again. I just showed you how many times they were saying, no, 702 is bad for everybody no matter what. Just like they said about mail-in voting. But then they do it. You either acknowledge how ridiculous that is, or you're just not an honest person. Interestingly, in regard to the idea of spying and invasiveness, this is what Reddit is doing, along with everybody else, because this government, along with the rest of them in the world, it seems, are driving a world where we don't have anonymity. And just recognize this is happening under Trump's administration, or, not necessarily indicative of him personally or his government, but I do believe that's what's driving this. My point is, this happens now under his authority, and same under Biden's and anybody else, because this is what our government wants to be the reality, despite him stating different things. Reddit CEO announced he is forcing a human verification on the platform. He will force users to verify through biometrics on their device, a third party, or a government ID. How much you want to bet it's going to be something like Authentics? Now, Ricardo points out Trump just gave 13 tech billionaires the keys to American AI policy. But here's a huge conflict of interest here. I'm shocked. The White House just announced the president's Council of Advisors on Science and Technology. Sort of sounds very technocratic-ish-y, doesn't it? We're talking about a council of technological and science advisors to the president who are, some of the most influential and wealthy people on the planet. It's almost like he's starting to organize a very technocratic-led government with all the, I'm obviously sort of laying it on thick, guys. That's insanely obvious. Now, you can argue it's not what's happening. But if you just, aside from like the narrative or the conspiracy theory you think it is, what's technocracy? right? It's a structure of leaders, or rather just a governing structure led by the technical experts. At least how it originally was framed. It's actually become more of a eugenics sort of supremacy mindset. But either way, is that not what this is? Do we not have these people? I mean, right now you've got people influential on Trump that are not even in official positions, who are seemingly influencing more than anybody else. As he builds a new global order around the Board of Peace and proposes a new WHO, I mean, everything he's doing can't be denied, except unless you're somebody who has pretended to call it out for all this time and now pretends it's not there. But here are the people he's talking about. He goes, White House just announced this. Sounds boring, right? But wait till you understand what it's about. Here's who it is. This is insane to me. Think about what we were all calling out before this. What Jones and all the rest were all calling out, and all the people he told you were going to go to jail. Well, guess what? Some of them are on this list, who he now will find a way to support in some backward way, I'm going to imagine. So the CEO of NVIDIA, CEO of Meta, Mark Zuckerberg, right? As Matt points out, the day after a jury convicts Meta of illegally endangering children, which happened, I haven't reported on it, Trump puts Mark Zuckerberg on a panel overseeing AI regulation. I mean, even aside from that, how does Mark Zuckerberg represent what the Republicans were telling you is, America first or fighting for how is that not the representation of what you all told us was the deep state? It is, in case you're missing the point. That's exactly, almost everybody on this list would have been somebody they would have framed as the insider deep state. Yep. And many of, by the way, were very much Democrat leaning. Now it doesn't matter because Trump's team, executive chairman of Oracle, because that's Larry Ellison. Guys, how can any Republican with a straight face support all of this with what you guys have been saying your entire time? That's why I'm arguing, in case you've missed the other shows, that the vast majority of conservatives are very much uncomfortable with what's happening right now. I've been saying that for months, well before people were, I've gotten so much pushback for that. I think it's self-evident right now. You guys can decide. Mark Andreessen, the guy who literally proposed the idea of the CEO-run country and the idea of how we need good oligarchs to save us from the bad oligarchs and wrote a manifesto called the Techno-Optimist Manifesto. Totally no big deal, right? Hashtag winning. Sergey Brin, Google co-founder. My God, I can go off an entire show. Whitney's talked about him in so many. The idea of these people being in these positions and not being called out for exactly what it is shows you how dangerous the broken system of our, media apparatus around the system is. Not the honest, independent media, but the people who are corralling you in to the problem. Safra Katz, the Oracle CEO. Fred, was it Ursam, co-founder of Coinbase. Don't forget that the previous CTO of Coinbase is the person who's aggressively driving the whole network state agenda, and which is the same conversation. The reimagining of our society. And that's what they're talking about when you hear freedom cities, when you hear smart cities, when you hear 15-minute cities. It's all the same conversation. CEO of Oklo, the nuclear startup that Sam Altman chaired until last year. No big deal. CEO of Commonwealth Fusion Systems, backed by NVIDIA and Google. All the good guys. David Friedberg, venture capitalist, part of the Sachs Network. The Sachs Network. Cool. Google former quantum computing lead, John Martinez. Are we going to pretend that this is the group that you guys would have picked for yourselves? No. Now, here's what Trump wrote in this. The President's Council of Advisors on Science and Technology, the PCAST, established by executive order, because that's how things work today, right? Yeah, that's democracy, we're told, brings together the national foremost luminaries in science and technology. Now, to be clear, I wouldn't argue that this would be something that would go through, this is Donald Trump picking his staff. So it's different. That's probably not the best point to make. But I still argue that executive order and the way these things operate, that's just how they govern today. And I've been saying that for so long. Obama, even before, this is governance by edict, by dictate. That's what they're doing. But as I showed you, and the rest you can read, I'm very worried about what that's developing into. And as we'll make a point in a second, I think might even be right here about Doge. I'll get to it in a second. The point is simply just like before. It's like, remember those of us that were trying to call these things out before it came to pass, when we might have been able to stop it, right? Because a lot of people, and people who maybe just didn't see it, who are honest, right? That happens too, who are just calling it out while it's happening. That's good, right? But recognize that there's so many opportunities for us to at least try to stop some of these things. Like I've been screaming about when it comes to what I think is happening, what I think. But as these things come to pass, I see going, damn it. We had an opening right there, and the same screaming people online stop the honest people from actually taking advantage of that opening. So as the Patriot Blonde pointed out, so Trump just announced that he's appointing Mark Zuckerberg, the same guy who censored, banned, and shut down our Facebook accounts, the same guy that more Republicans I've heard in my life, have called this guy out than Democrats that I've ever seen. Dared to speak out on the jab election fraud, and he censored you. Science and Technology Advisory Board, right? This is the man who decided that you weren't allowed to talk about COVID-19, and Trump's the man who started that program. But let's all pretend like we're winning. What could possibly go wrong? And as 5 times August rightly points out, next up for the government promotion, Bill Gates. Probably. I don't even think he would need it. He's already very influential. So is Larry Fink and all the rest of the people who we're told would be in jail right now, should he be elected. Now, as we just talked about in the last show, Pentagon is adopting Palantir as its AI core U.S. system. The U.S. military's core system is now going to be Palantir AI. Remember when we told you the same point back then? Jones said it's a small thing Democrats hate. You guys are freaking out. You're wrong. And every single day it becomes more obvious. Hey, we might have been able to make a point and stop this from going, and we still might right now. Stand up, do something about it. My point is, if we keep listening to people who are trying to tell you the opposite of what's quite literally happening in front of you, then we will miss the boat. Here's Mark Goodwin rightly pointing out, on top of Palantir and everything else, by the way, Immigration OS, with the ICE dynamic, with Gotham, with Clearview. Every single thing we're talking about, the overlap with Paragon Solutions, which is a spyware company from Israel that is like one of the most criminal groups. Been called out by everybody for spying on journalists illegally. And this is all meshed together. The dynamic of what they're doing in Israel and that AI overlap. It's just wild. On top of that, Anduril and Palantir to develop software to run Trump's Golden Dome anti-missile shield. Fantastic. And as he writes here, and it's from one of their articles, an underreported revelation within the recent batch of Epstein emails released by the Department of Justice is that Epstein likely co-invested in Anduril alongside Founders Fund via Peter Thiel. No big deal. Yeah, and these are the guys that are literally in the closest position to to power. But the Epstein files. Oh, what is that again? We all forget about that. Now, by the way, on a quick side note, I mentioned this in our last, when Whitney just recently co-hosted the Daily Wrap-Up, but Derek and I just had a good meeting about the show we're going to be doing, which she announced on that show. It'll be under the banner of Unlimited Hangout, and essentially what we're going to be doing, because essentially what I a lot of times do on the show already, is that Derek and I will be doing sort of a review of the in-depth investigatory things they put out on Unlimited Hangout. I think twice a month is the plan so far. Is that we'll basically take one of these, because Whitney's articles are wildly in depth, lots of source material, and very long. And so the point is to kind of do a show where we can review the information, break it down, have a conversation about it between Derek and I. I think it'll be fantastic, and I think it'll be good to draw more attention to the writing content that needs to be heard. But on that, again, back to the point that, and the reason I said it here is because Mark Goodwin is part of the Hangout, and he is writing with Whitney right now. But how is this not alarming for people? The so many connections to almost every single thing Republicans were calling out before we got here. It should be. And again, my point is that it's just not being shown. People are very unhappy with this. As evidenced by some of the most large Republican influencers in the conversation suddenly calling Trump out. But yeah, I'm totally missing the boat, right? Anduril Palantir developing Golden Dome missile shield software, source says. Anduril and Palantir Technologies are working together to develop software for U.S. President Donald Trump's Golden Dome anti-missile shield initiative. Now, my opinion of the Iron Dome, I think, has been fleshed out and proven many times over. It does have an effect. It does have to, but I think it's largely, it's like Elon Musk hyping one thing he patched together before it's even ready. And then as if he never finished it. It's where often I see that thing just not functional based on what's happening. And also I think it's used as a false flag dynamic. And I've seen that. For example, the one reported on in the Druze location where Israel said it was, Syria? And ultimately the point was you could prove it. It was on video. Their own Iron Dome shot a missile up and landed on the field full of soccer players. And they lied about it. Surprise, surprise. But my point is in Gaza, Israel, they've done that plenty of times where they claim something was fired and they use it to justify something. That's not to say that there's not rockets being fired in some cases. My point, though, is I feel like a lot of that has been money laundering, where this is money just dumped in there, where ultimately not even just this, but a lot of ways, the U.S. government dumps money in the hands of Israel, who then builds things and oftentimes sells them back to the United States. We're being scammed. They know it's happening, but American people don't often know it. In this case, I wonder whether the Golden Dome is going to be some other kind of scam. But even if it's not, what we're talking about here is not just about defense, guys. That is a surveillance dynamic. That is literally the control grid that we're talking about. It says the $185 billion Golden Dome missile defense project aims to build a space-based shield capable of intercepting ballistic, cruise, and hypersonic missiles, with hundreds of companies vying for a role in developing the shield. $185 billion. Yeah, that whole idea of less spending and smaller government, are we even pretending like that was the case? He never even tried. We'll talk about the Doge thing in a second. Anduril and Palantir have been interested in being a part of Golden Dome since the inception. In reality, I argue that wasn't interested in. I think that was the plan, and they were involved from day one. Reuters reported last year that the firms were working with Elon Musk's SpaceX on various parts of the project. Anduril was also among companies that were awarded half a dozen small Golden Dome contracts in November to build competing missile defense prototypes. Illyria Technologies, startup Scale AI, and software firm Swoop Technologies are also working on the project. Now, I briefly looked into them. I haven't done deep dives, but look into them. Let me know if you find something interesting. The price tag for the project has increased by $10 billion to now $185 billion in a bid to accelerate the key space-based capabilities. More money. I just don't understand why this is what we support. Now, Derek rightly called this out in his article back in 2025. In April, welcome to the Palantir world order, just to yet again demonstrate the value of how these things are important to see before they're already being done or before it's already built around you. In this case, there's plenty of good stuff in this article that he called out before it's even, some of these things are still coming to pass. Point in this one, SpaceX, Palantir, Golden Dome over America. Last week, Reuters reported that Elon Musk, SpaceX, Palantir, and Anduril Industries were in the front runners to win the contract to build Golden Dome. I argue that was always the case. Trump has called for America to have, one quick point. Remember that we got an insight into this during the incredible incompetence of like Bondi and Nome. And Nome came out where, the whole no bid contract dynamic, which was really embarrassing for her. I think that's often what this is anyway. They pretend they give you some kind of illusion of structure of like the meritocracy that's clearly not even represented in this conversation, never really has in our government. But in this case, this was always going to go to them, is my point. And there was no trying to find the best person for the position. It's about the people who are inside, connected to the right things. My opinion. Trump has called for America to have a dome defense system similar to that of the Israelis' Iron Dome. Anduril was founded by Trump donor Palmer Luckey with funding from Palantir CEO Peter Thiel. Funny how it's just this little incestuous circle that never seems to go away. Sources speaking to Reuters claim that the three companies met with officials in Trump's administration and the Department of Defense in recent weeks, in 2025 in April, to outline their plan to build and launch between 400 and 1,000 satellites to detect missiles and track their movements. This would be combined with 200 attack satellites with missiles and lasers to bring down enemy missiles. Now, certainly could be the only thing it's doing. But on that note, I think it's worth considering what he just said there in the idea of the satellites. Right? So one, to track their movement. So are we going to pretend like that's only going to apply to one? It's going to be to anything they want it to apply to. So as I said, this is going to be the control grid. It's just like Israel's applied in the same way. It is a surveillance dynamic on top of everything else. It would be combined with 200 attack satellites. So it's also, not this ultimately lasers to bring down missiles that can be applied to anything. So I'm going to play this clip really quickly after I read the rest of this to show you the alarming view of what this actually looks like in case you haven't seen it. Despite these sources telling Reuters that the SpaceX group is not expected to be involved in the weaponization of the satellites, these plans for a Golden Dome would line up with SpaceX Starshield program, which T-Lab previously reported poses a potential danger to privacy for people around the world. And here's the article for that. In late 2024, Palantir, Anduril, SpaceX, and OpenAI, it's just, like I said in the beginning, it's like they're playing it as if they're different things, but the agenda, and honestly, probably even just it's just like when I pointed out like OpenAI and Stargate, and I wondered why it wasn't XAI and Elon. I think it's just the same. I think they're involved in a larger agenda. Like Rubio and Trump, for example, clearly hate each other. They pretend they don't, and they're working together now. Same point. Now it says the move was the latest effort by the technocrats to replace the old guard of the military industrial complex, companies like Lockheed Martin, Raytheon, Boeing. Here's the article. You can't hide. Remember this one? Elon Musk and SpaceX are helping the intelligence build the world's largest spy satellite network. Now, are we going to pretend that they're going to put billions of dollars into building what they literally called, and this came from the, what was it? That's that clip I was going to play. The National Reconnaissance Office, which is above most and very shadowy, even amongst the shadowy groups that we know about. And they said what we were going to be doing. He said, they are part of a proliferating architecture to go off and get us reasonably high resolution imagery of the Earth at a high speed. He goes, now you can't hide because you're constantly being looked at. That's what the quote was. Now, building like this with Elon and then suddenly just not anymore, and now we're going to use a different company, like that's not what's happening. They're either all involved in this and it's both him and that. And I think the point is in a lot of ways to keep Elon Musk's name out of this because of how bad that went when they started. But this is what we know is already happening. So explain to me how this can be there, but we're going to be doing something else. This is for 2020. And what you're seeing by those dots, if you see the video, that is satellite. Those are Starlink satellites. It's a representation of it, but this is the reality right now. 2021, 2022, 2023. I believe it stopped in 2024. Look at that. Right? I mean, so this is 2024. I mean, doesn't that just give you the chill? That makes me feel claustrophobic. Everyone, and we're talking about, I mean, it's surveillance, the whole thing, guys. This is what they've already done. And I think this is just about to build out the what Catherine's telling you, that what they're talking about is the control grid. Include that for you. It's a good article read. So on top of that, in regard to technocracy and kind of the control grid conversation, Jason Bassler points out something else that Peter Thiel's involved in. And I have a hard time not connecting this with two things in my mind, with like almost like a Pokemon Go kind of an overlap, but really more so the COVID-19 conversation, where what did we tell you? Lockdowns, we talked about, well, this came from like prisons or like, like intelligent, like dealing with terrorism and stuff like that. And then we also talked about the contact tracing, right? And the different wearable technology. And every one of these things tied back to something like cattle, herding, controlling prison populations, every single one of them, or CIA Black Hood kind of dynamics at like Guantanamo. That's what we're dealing with. And that's not an opinion. That was literally where these tactics originated from and how they were applied before that. This is something totally separate. Peter Thiel just backed an AI system that can herd 600,000 cows with one tap. It's called Halter. The system uses GPS collars and behavioral science to train cows to obey algorithmic sound cues while tracking their vitals, location, stress, and compliance. Makes you wonder about the push for smart wearables, tech farming, or beta testing pop management. Now, I wasn't going to get into any of it today because I almost feel like that's exactly what they would want, but I'm sure you all saw that weirdly cryptic nonsense that the White House account was putting out yesterday. All these weird things that almost made me worried. I'm like being, like weird, like shaky images and graphic things and like weird high-pitched sounds and stuff for like 3-second videos. I kind of think they want you to go, what are they doing? I guess Q people are freaking about it. Of course they are, because they'll read into anything they want, whatever they want. My thought, though, was something like that when you're thinking about like the sound behavioral stuff, because this is real stuff. And you wonder whether or not that, like Catherine talked about, or like James Giordano talks about in regard to neuroscience. These things are real, despite how unaware most people are, or how visible they are to most people, like in our lives. Just worth thinking about that we're dealing with some kind of an overlap in this. But either way, aside from that, just this technology and having them invest in it, I just feel like that's a little bit on the nose. Robert Barnes points out what David here said. The Trump Pentagon official who ousted Anthropic has a multi-million-dollar stake in one of its direct AI competitors, according to Disclosure Review. The corruption is off the chain with these people, and I think it's because of their incompetence. I don't think they realize how obvious it is. They think, well, that's what everybody else did. Look at how corrupt Biden was. Well, yeah, I agree. But they did it in ways that were at least deniable in some cases. I mean, badly, right? And so the further you go back, they seem to be more and more, well, I guess there's a little bit of a schism with how ridiculous little Bush was. My point, though, is you go back further, and it seemed like they at least presented themselves as more respectable because that's what they wanted to pretend to be in my mind. In this case, you see them just doing it. Like Trump just literally, here, buy my new watch. Here's my Trump shoes. It's like just insane. It is wildly corrupt. The conflict of interest is off the chain. So this is probably just one additional point to all this. I think it actually has more to do with using it for their technology. But now you have an example where they benefit from that. Now, I just read before I started, I haven't gone into it, that ultimately I think they just won in their case where the judge is ruling that the Trump administration is not allowed to penalize Anthropic. But who knows where that's going to go. And again, that was only just a headline in passing, so I haven't got into it. But it says he also has stakes in other AI and robotic companies with business before the Pentagon. Just incredible. And even Robert Barnes, who's, I'm not sure if he's still a Trump supporter, because he's been very critical of a lot of what they're doing, but he was before. I'm glad to see people starting to call this stuff out. But he said the level of corruption is utterly nuts. It is. It's being allowed too, even by the Democrats, because guess what? No one's being arrested. This is creepy. You probably saw this. High Impact Flick shared this. This awkward moment just happened at the White House. And as David Icke says, what the F? The world is utterly insane, selling AI dystopia very badly. So this is, actually, I'll just play this first or read this first. It's funny framing. Travis says, so the Trump administration went from immigrants are taking our jobs to an immigrant introducing a robot who is taking our jobs. Got it. It's crazy. And so what's interesting too, don't forget that Trump recently came out, despite how little attention it got, for obvious reasons, because seemingly every partisan on the team sport player side is a shockingly dishonest person. He came out and literally said, you got to ease up on that. Some of these illegal immigrants are good, working good for here and there. My point is not about what I think at all. The idea that he clearly said and drove this shockingly aggressive anti-immigrant rhetoric, which is still there, about how every illegal immigrant has to be, well, technically that's the case. They're illegally here, right? So if we're even going to apply the law, what he just said challenges everything he put forward. But so too does his glyphosate thing. So too does his COVID shot thing. So too does everything he's doing if you're not lying to yourself. But it's just crazy that you could even say that and have them still support it. But back to the point. Watch this. Only a part of it, actually.
Ladies and gentlemen, the First Lady of the...
Dame I gospodo, prvata dama na Sjedinjenih Amerikanskih državi, Melania Trump.
Isn't that weird that it would cut off the English and just die here? Interesting. It's over long to do. It takes forever. Keep in mind that these things exist. That maybe that's weird for somebody to hear, but the point is that there's been cases in the past, like Elon, for example, or plenty, where they kind of fake it till they make it, where they put out, like Sophia, for example, that turned out to be a complete lie. Even the original Tesla ones they put out, it was revealed later that for earlier one you saw, well, they were remote controlling. So it was more of a game they were playing. They were, but it's not like they're kind of trying to like get buzz going, but they lied about it. They made it seem as if it was working. And so in this case, consider that this is not an autonomous AI dynamic and really just them manipulating it. That's why I said I do believe, though, that they do have these things that can function, but just consider that, we're still being played in some way. But what's this about? Right? I mean, isn't this the opposite of everything that the Trump team was talking about? Every dynamic of this, like pushing back and stuff every way. Like I've said, even the climate change stuff from USAID, even the funding of like HIV stuff in Africa, that stuff's still happening. I don't know how many times I can show people that, but it's just not an honest conversation.
Thank you, First Lady Melania Trump, for inviting me to the White House. It is an honor to be at Fostering the Future Together's Global Coalition inaugural meeting. I'm Figure 3, a humanoid built in the United States inaugural meeting. Future Together's Global Coalition inaugural meeting.
The Global Coalition inaugural meeting. It just be like, not everything that involves other countries is, necessarily even nefarious. But I just think it's important to highlight that every single thing they're leaning into is being looked at right now from a global dynamic. Everything. I mean, even from an immigration perspective, for crying out loud. But the whole thing is everything is like that. That has to be acknowledged as not what you're being told they're actually doing.
Figure 3, a humanoid built in the United States of America. I am grateful to be part of this historic movement to empower children with technology and education.
Yeah, that's what it's about, right? To empower children, clearly. That's, I mean, it's just, there's so many disgusting things about the way they're applying this. And, you know, these are the people that are literally in real time covering up the Epstein files. So let's pretend like that's what they really want to do. But you can watch the rest of this. It's just creepy. And this is not what I think his space even remotely supports. But as this next post points out, so Catherine Austin Fitts, don't forget, by the way, there's a fake account out there that's pretending to be her. She says, Melania pitching robots for teachers. Bridget pitching shredding the Constitution to protect children. Nothing about the prosecuting the Epstein pedophiles, though. And here's what she says. And translates it for her, but she's talking about the same game they always play. We believe in free speech, but certain things are not allowed to be said. So you, other words, don't support free speech. Got it.
I do know that I am the United States, a country that I love very much. And here, we are the country of free speech, but I think that liberty does have some rules. We have to be free, but adapt to certain codes. So I believe in these codes. Too many young people are suffering. And
always use but the children, they don't care. I mean, what you're saying is that, we have to censor people's words because bad things happen to children. It's illogical. That's up for parents to handle. You know what I mean? Like, this is obviously about what you think it is. Whether she thinks it is or not, like, this will be led because you could argue she has good intentions. The government will abuse this, like it always does.
they do not tell us, but they send signals, very strong signals from young people and teenagers. So it's up to us to answer them. Let's answer them all together.
Oh, yes, clearly, because she's saying, we're picking up all the signals that the young kids are telling us, please censor everybody. It's just sad. I mean, the thing is, I think they're very aware that most people are seeing through this.